intend, any harm or any hatred towards any people. I'm for one, I'm for love. And I extend it every day. People that know me know I have no hatred in my heart, and I never try to, put another religion down to uplift my religion or my race. So, from the bottom of my heart, I just want you guys to understand that, and it's coming from me and my feelings. And, I just hopefully everybody respects my platform, my opinion, to try to just enlighten my people and just let everybody know that there's no hatred involved.
That was Eagles wide receiver DeSean Jackson apologizing for anti-Semitic comments he posted. Meanwhile, in a since-deleted IG video, former NBA player Stephen Jackson said the following about DeSean Jackson's post. So I just read a statement that the Philadelphia Eagles posted regarding DeSean Jackson's comments. He was trying to educate himself, educate people, and he's speaking the truth, right? He's speaking the truth. He didn't hate anybody, but he's speaking the truth. The fact that he knows and he tries to educate others, but y'all don't want us to educate ourselves. The NBA champion Stephen Jackson has been a voice for racial inequality since the death of his dear friend. Rest in peace to George Floyd. Stephen A., I'll start with you here, and let me just say that it's an honor to be a part of this show, and you guys did an exceptional job on this last segment, and I appreciate the dialogue that we're able to have here on First Take, and that we don't shy away from these issues. Stephen A., you're up first. What's your reaction to Stephen Jackson kind of doubling down on DeSean Jackson's comments?
Over the last few weeks, the most difficult subject I've had to broach is anything regarding Stephen Jackson. Why? Because I'm very, very fond of him. I got love for him. He's a real brother, true and authentic to his core, and I got so much respect for him. And George Floyd was his friend. And so I understand the emotions that come with him in this particular day and time, and how, how the fervor that comes with it and how passionate he is about these subjects, now more so than at any other time that I can recall in his career. Stephen Jackson's a good brother, but I've disagreed with him a couple of times over the last few weeks, and I disagree with him today. First of all, he needs to understand something. What truth are you talking about? Care to elaborate? Because the Jewish community is saying that what DeSean Jackson said is not true. And he was talking about them. So what truth are you talking about? That's number one. But number two, and more importantly, and this is where this gets deep for me, Max, I think that Stephen Jackson, his passion and his heart is in the right place, but he's veering away from what the ultimate goal is. George Floyd had this white cop keep his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. For the last 2+ minutes, there was no response from George Floyd. A police officer, according to reports, actually told that cop that, and the cop still wouldn't get his feet off of George Floyd's neck. As a result, we see what has happened in our society today. So we've gone from George Floyd getting choked to death, essentially, to statues being torn down, to tweets. But all along the way, when we talk about these things and the symbolic gestures that have come along with it, our ultimate goal of really creating change to address racial oppression, racial inequality, police brutality, and those things, it's fallen by the wayside. Because these kind of things allow folks, particularly white folks, to have something that distracts us from what's really going on. Because I got news for you. Even though you might have a lighter hue, a lighter pigmentation, the Jewish community, not the white community, the Jewish community is the one that had to endure the Holocaust. When we talk about 6 million Jews that were murdered by that devil, Adolf Hitler, that wasn't white people that was murdered, those were Jewish folks. So from a categorical perspective, it's two different. It's two different groups, okay? When we're talking about racial oppression, racial inequality, and beyond, we're talking about what's happening in this nation. In this nation. Now, we might sit up there and look at the Jewish community, and Max, you have educated me about that because the perception was Jewish folks stick together, and obviously they're incredibly empowered and stuff like that. And you, as I'm sure you will do again, had to educate me about things that go on in the Jewish community and how folks feel about those things. And I stand back because I'm not Jewish, you are. But I can tell you this. When we sit up there, a lot of people in the black community respect the Jewish community because the perception of y'all being together and coming together and galvanizing to address certain issues is what we believe as a community we should do a better job of. But who is that against? It's against white folks in positions of power that have exercised racial oppression, racial inequality, and things of that nature. If you're Stephen Jackson, if you are others, particularly in this moment in time, that's what our eyes were supposed to be focused on. But here we are talking about some post on Instagram and Stephen Jackson validating it through his eyes and through his lens. And we're talking about that instead of what Stephen Jackson himself has said he wants us to focus on. And so now as a result, what are we going to be talking about? We're talking about Adolf Hitler. We're going to be talking about being educated about the Holocaust and the Jewish community and Jewish history. We're going to be talking about those things instead of issues that directly involve us as black people. I'm sure that wasn't Stephen Jackson's goal. I'm sure that wasn't Deshaun Jackson's goal. But it happened. And now, watch what happened.
I mean, if another...
We're going to sit up here and talk about that instead of these other things.
If another community that has experienced depression or marginalization or discrimination in various ways gets some of what you would call the shrapnel, like become some collateral damage in our kind of culture wars right now, and the light is shown upon the plight of Native Americans or the history of oppression of Jewish people, that's okay. That we can take some time out and say, from focusing on African Americans who are, I mean, the story of this country cannot be told without talking about our original sin as a country, which is the way that European Americans treated African Americans and Native Americans, but particularly what has been the focus recently is African Americans. And that's really this country's history. However, if the attention is diverted for a moment to say that, you know, by the way, women or gay people or Jews or some other group, this has also been their experience, and because tangentially it's related somehow, that's okay. And here we come to the classical kind of anti-Semitic issue, which is that Jews are scapegoated. And here Jews are a convenient scapegoat, and Deshaun Jackson's social media post that he thought was from Adolf Hitler was scapegoating Jews, and not in a true way at all. Like when Stephen Jackson, and I agree with you, Stephen A., some people you have a positive association with, like a strong one, you see them, you just get happy, right? Because they're just good peoples. That's my experience with Stephen Jackson. Love talking to Stephen Jackson, really have a real affinity for him. But when he says, when Stephen Jackson says he's speaking the truth, right? No, Stephen, he's not. He's not. What he's quoting is nonsense. It's not true. It's ahistorical. It is not part of history. Now, a lot of different people, white people who belong to different subcategories of white people were involved in the slave trade. That includes Jews. There are such things as Jewish slumlords, Stephen A. That is true. And just as there are, and Jews do benefit from white privilege in this country. White Jews, no question. I am one of them. However, Jews were also disproportionately represented in the civil rights struggle. Disproportionately represented in the civil rights struggle, among white people. As a matter of fact, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, right, Mississippi burning, two of them were Jewish because they were going down registering black people to vote, and like so it's not that you deny certain aspects of your culture's history. It's that you try to correct those and celebrate the good stuff. This goes for every culture. But as far as Stephen Jackson is concerned, referring to Deshaun Jackson's social media post, Stephen, none of that is true. It's simply false. And if you think it's true, you're wrong. A lot of people, Stephen, this is what I say, susceptible to low-quality information. Lacking a formal education, people will do things like take religious texts as history books. They're not history books. There's sometimes some history in a religious text, but they're not history books. And this kind of, and if you do not vet the information carefully, you can believe something that either appeals to your kind of confirmation bias or kind of sounds right to you because you don't know how to vet the information and say, well, that's the truth, but it's not. If Stephen Jackson thinks that what Deshaun Jackson quoted is true, he's wrong.
Let me break something down. Let me try to put it in simpler terms to of Stephen Jackson. For example, you know, black folks were making a lot of noise about addressing racial inequality and racial oppression, and the affirmative action policies were born because of that, okay? Who's been the biggest benefactors or the biggest beneficiaries of